Yeah,
so
yeah. How about
now
that?
now we're on record. Okay.
All
Oh yeah,
right.
should ask what part. You're East Coast, are you?
I am. Yes.
What town?
Uh
I'm from Atlanta originally, though I haven't been
oh,
there for
okay.
15 years.
I got you. Okay, so I am an East Tennessean by birth. I grew up outside of Knoxville, um, but I now live outside of Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
So not terribly far from Atlanta. I've got family in Noonan and around that area. So
no, I just put my roots down here in 2010 and haven't even bothered to leave the country. I actually lost my passport. In 2 weeks, I'm going to the American embassy to go get a new one. I lost
oh
like in the house. I
no.
just can't find it. I know I put it
Jeez
somewhere.
Louise. Oh,
Yeah, but
I hate that.
right. But I'm not in the States, so not having. I mean, I got a like alien card or whatever. But yeah, it's
Right.
like I'm technically like illegal at the moment, I guess.
Ooh.
Well, I won't.
Ooh.
Well, I'm not that. I mean, I can't leave the country at this moment. Let's put it that way.
Well, you know what? You might be better off. So,
Yeah. Haven't left the country since 2010, so
wow.
excuse me.
What may I ask? What took you to Japan?
I don't remember in the first place. That was 20 years ago. Um,
Okay.
just I was doing teaching jobs and every job was a little farther away from home. So at first I taught at a place in South Carolina, like environmental education. And
hmm
then after that, the season after that, I was up in the Poconos, and then I was in Maine, and then I was in Canada, Grand Manan Island, and I was like, okay, maybe Japan is next. And that one took,
Okay.
that one stuck. So
Very cool. Yeah, Japan is cool. May I ask what part of Japan?
Nagano, it's kind of right smack in the
Nagano.
middle. So
Okay. I'm not familiar with Nagano.
we had the Olympics in the late
Oh, okay.
90s, Winter Olympics.
Got it. Okay. Neat.
So yeah, Tokyo is about a 2 hour bullet train ride, I think.
Okay.
So I can
Cool.
make Tokyo Disneyland my day park, but I do have to pay a big train fee to do that. So
Yeah, yeah. Got to pay for those heckin' zoomies. So,
but I do get to wake up and go to sleep in my own bed when I take a visit there. So
not
that's
not a
nice.
bad deal. Not a bad
Right.
deal.
Okay, let's do some zone then. I will
All right.
what I'm going to do, and this is my really lazy version of editing, is I just leave a 5 second silence that I can spot, and then I start the show.
Sure.
Welcome to Time Enough Podcast. It's where we delve into all of the episodes of the Twilight Zone and beyond. As always, this is Matt here, coming in for today's episode from Mission Log Genealogy Podcast. It's Ashley Thomas. Hi, how you doing?
Hey, good Matt. How you doing?
Yeah, and you've been doing genealogy for 6, 9 months, something like that.
Since June of 2024. So, 8 months. Almost
Okay.
almost nine. So,
All right, because
yeah.
for the folks that don't know that, I mean, if you're listening to this Twilight Zone podcast, you must already have an interest in old TV, and genealogy, of course, is kind of a master's course in that sort of thing, where
Yeah,
you
yeah.
learn about all the ins and outs of how scripts get written, things like that. One thing on the Twilight Zone, we still like obviously it doesn't have like a writer's room, I think, like a modern show. So, and in this episode, when we get into the trivia, Queen of the Nile today has a bit of weird writing trivia that happens in season 5 of this show. But yeah, before I hit record, you were talking about while you're a fan of the vibe, you haven't seen that much Twilight Zone, which actually is where I kind of was coming from starting this podcast. I'd only seen about a third of the episodes when I started. So, um,
Yeah, only really seen a handful of Twilight Zone episodes. That being said, I have watched all of Night Gallery, and I've seen at least the first season of Jordan Peele's Twilight Zone, and I think I've seen a couple of odd episodes of the '80s series. I don't think I've seen any of the Forest Whitaker series, but yeah, Twilight Zone is something I've always liked and enjoyed, and like, oh, the Twilight Zone's on. Yeah, I'm gonna watch that. That's cool. Uh, but I've just never sat down and watched it from front to back, which is on the to-do list.
yeah, I haven't watched much of the '80s Zone recently. I mean, we'll be getting to that one eventually, but the weird thing with that is I grew up in the '80s, so that was the one that was on TV. We didn't have cable. We had so that it's like UHF. You get the '80s Zone in the
Right.
'80s. They didn't show the Serling one so much. So it was like I don't think I really started seeing old school Twilight Zones until I was probably 20 something.
Mm.
But that'll make revisiting that quite interesting. Um, Let me give a little trivia on today's episode. Again, Queen of the Nile. Original air date was March 6th, 1964. Jerry Soule wrote the script, though it is the last of three episodes that he would give screen credit to an ailing Charles Beaumont. Soule did write plenty more under his own name, including multiple episodes of Alfred Hitchcock Presents and the original Star Trek. John Bram is back to direct. German born, he ended up in Hollywood helming genre films like The Undying Monster and The Mad Magician. And going from the tone of this episode, that makes a whole lot of sense. Anne Blythe played Pamela Morris Constance Taylor. She was a Universal contract player in the 1940s, gaining a supporting Academy Award nom for Mildred Pierce in 1945. Though her last screen credit is in a 1985 episode of Murder, She Wrote, she is still with us as of this recording at the post Cleopatra age of 96. Jordan Herrick was played by Lee Phillips. His acting career was basically as a 60s TV day player. We saw him in The Zone last season in Passage on the Lady Anne. And both of those episodes, I came in thinking, oh, I know that guy's face, and I'm going to find a bunch of things he is in, and he's really not in that much. It's kind of crazy. So he looks like somebody else. Maybe one of the Yorks from Bewitched is what I'm thinking of. Or not Dick York or Sargent, excuse me. They're not both Yorks. Celia Lovsky was Viola Draper. Other than this Twilight Zone episode, her main claim to fame is as Vulcan priestess T'Pau, again on the original Star Trek Amok Time episode. So, a few Trek lines to draw between today's Twilight Zone and old school Star Trek. uh,
Yeah,
Actually, I have the prologue in the chat for you. If you could give us a quick read through.
I would love to. Jordan Herrick, syndicated columnist whose work appears in more than 100 newspapers. By nature, a cynic, a disbeliever, caught for the moment by a lovely vision. He knows the vision he's seen is no dream. She is Pamela Morris, renowned movie star, whose name is a household word and whose face is known to millions. What Mr. Herrick does not know is that he has also just looked into the face of the Twilight Zone.
All right. Nice job there.
Thank you.
So I felt like this is kind of like a vibes episode.
Yeah, yeah. So just because this is my first time on the show, tell me what you mean by a vibes episode.
Atmospheric. They
Yeah.
brought back an old horror director. So that's how TV works at this point. And it's a lot of, Hollywood pro workman guy that are not auteurs and they're showing up at the end of their career. They can do this shoot in 5 days or less, no problem. And it's gonna have a few, classy film elements in it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment of the kind of what we're working with in this episode. Def vibes. I'd go with that, sure.
Yeah, there's also something where you said you've only seen a handful, and I've been watching this up through season 5, and we are picking up so many more episodes that kind of mirror earlier episodes, which I would probably draw a line from this to a Long Live Walter Jamison from season 1, which has a
Mm.
man that is basically immortal, and he spoiler for the episode we already covered, but he turns to dust at the end in that episode. Whereas this one, she I guess we'll call her Cleopatra for fun. She's just kind of she's going to keep energy vamping as long as she can, I guess.
hmm that to show you the kind of brand of nerd I am, I'm like, she's a Sailor Moon villain. She's stealing people's life force and energy, uh, and feeding upon them. I also got like Dorian Gray vibes from this,
Mm.
because we open like, here's this beautiful portrait, and I'm like, okay, yes, it's a beautiful portrait, but it's not hidden up in the attic with a cover over it, so nobody can see how this actress actually looks. But it definitely sprung to mind when he was like, "Oh, 1940. How old is this lady?" Hmm.
Yeah, she throws it all out there. You don't have to go looking in the closet for that aging
Yeah.
portrait. It's right on the well, it's not aging in this case. Something I thought of, and this is I was thinking of the Anne Rice stuff, which I haven't thought of since the 90s. It's probably because of the name of this episode, Queen of the Nile. But then we do
Fair.
have like basically like an immortal vampire thing going on here.
Mm.
A little
Hmm.
different than the typical vampire, but it's the same basic story and same kind of thing that you get in, he invites the guy over to do some work in the original Dracula and ends up, turning him into his servant or whatever. So, and
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
less bug eating in this episode, I think. Although we do get the bug, we get the scarab, so
We do, we do. Gross. Uh,
which I was actually if the one thing that I was like having trouble with my willing suspension of disbelief in this is her hiding of that scarab is ridiculous. It's in a little glass case in a plant. And has she been doing this for centuries? Maybe that's just real, hide in plain sight and nobody cares.
maybe also like if you somehow miss the glass case, you're like, oh, a bug on a plant, no big deal. Like maybe
Ye-
there's that.
It's a fascinating bug, though. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, certainly the elderly daughter might have noticed it by now. So, um,
right.
maybe another reason I'm calling this a vibes episode is I am looking at my notes here and like a third in, it just says he's going to get energy vampired, isn't he? So I guess where this was
Oh,
going was
yeah.
just crystal clear, which there has a week or two ago, I was like, I really didn't know where this episode was going. So that is one. This is plot wise, it's by the numbers. I guess that's again, you asked why is it a vibes episode? Because I did like this episode. I think that's why. The story is just kind of like not that challenging for a fan of supernatural stuff.
Right. Right. Yeah, I could call what was going to happen pretty quick within the episode. That being said, I think it's really interesting that I'm here to talk about this episode because one, this wasn't the original plan, but two, there's a lot of lines in here about women and their vanity and how we have to look good or look a certain way. Or that's the only thing we care about. I thought that's going to be something interesting to touch on. I don't know if you want to go ahead and dive into that or if you've got other
Let's
stuff
go
you want to
for
talk
it.
about
No, you had
first.
me looking at did I write down quotes from this episode, which I didn't. So I didn't pick up on that as much, maybe because I'm a guy, but because sometimes I look at my notes and I put down like five quotes, and here I have nothing in quotation. So yeah, I hit a few of those.
Well, so as somebody who spends a lot of time watching 1960s TV for, Mission Log Genealogy, which of course is all Gene Roddenberry's non-Star Trek TV writing, there's a lot of story work or comments made in um, 1960s TV about women are very concerned with how they look. We got to look good. We can't look old. We got to look hot all the time. And so when Mrs. Draper, her daughter, says, how do you think I feel watching my reflection yellow and age while she stays young and beautiful for, all this time? And so my thought was one, can I guess the scarab can only be used by one person, or maybe two, the daughter obviously has some sort of like moral fiber where it's like no, killing people is bad, therefore I'm not gonna do that to preserve my youthful visage. uh Also, this uh this woman, we'll call her Cleopatra, I guess. I'm assuming that this is the queen of the Nile to which we refer. Um, she's supposed to be the most beautiful woman in the world. Why not stay that way forever? And she's obsessed with how she looks all over the living room. There's not just the portrait. There's different pictures of her. Uh, Even when she's in the swimming pool, you hear off screen, you hear her like jump in the swimming pool, you hear a splash. But when we cut to her in the swimming pool, she has perfect hair and makeup. Which, if you're going in the swimming pool, you ain't gonna bother doing your hair and makeup because it's all gonna come off. So unless she has somehow perfected the don't get my hair wet, splash into the pool and swim around, I obviously she's just, keeping her head above water because again, must look perfect. Also, like I'm thinking about the swimming pool. Is that like a metaphor for rebirth, or is that the the suburban Nile, as it were? And
Maybe. I never had a pool in
she's
my yard, but
hey, yeah, me either. So, but just a few thoughts that ran through my mind while I'm watching this is, of course, if a woman is evil, it has to do with her preserving her look. See also Wicked Queen from Snow White, uh, who has to be the fairest of them all.
yeah, as you're mentioning that, because it is the Twilight Zone's in such a weird place of being mostly looking forward, occasionally getting a little stuck backwards. I mean, she is a villain in this basically, so
Sure.
the vanity is not, she's the face of the Twilight Zone that you're looking into or whatever. Um, but a few things I was like, how much does the daughter know? Because even she's like, well, she's at least as old as I am, and probably a lot older than that, but I don't know. And at the end, it's like, you came in the room too soon. Like she's never done that before. Like she's never seen the scarab or whatever, you know? Um,
Yeah.
and my other thing coming back was actually just in Japan, we have all the hot springs, and there are a lot of women who will go in, and of course, you don't swim in the hot springs, right? So they will go in and keep their hair and makeup perfect by keeping their head slightly
Mm.
above water. But
Yeah, I mean, I guess you don't really want to dip your head into water that hot, but yeah,
I mean, I'm in the well, yeah. A lot of people might dump it on their head. I mean, of course, it
yeah.
is segregated, so I'm in with all the dudes when I go to the hot spring. But yeah, during the big holidays, the ladies would go to the ladies' side, and they would come out with the hair and the makeup, but that's
Hmm.
different than hearing a splash of jumping into a pool. So
Yeah.
your point is certainly valid.
I mean, that's probably just like a silly little editing thing, but I heard it and then I see her as like her hair and makeup are perfect.
Interestingly, I mean, of course the actress is very attractive, but she says she's 38 and she's not going for 25 looking, which I
Right,
did think was
right.
interesting, that maybe that's when she discovered the scarab or something, and you just stay where you are when you find it. So if you find it as a elderly person, I guess you're gonna have a crappy mortal life.
Mm.
Or crappier, I don't know.
Yeah, that is an interesting question. I don't know. Do we know how old the actress was off the top of our heads when she
Wiki
shot the
is
episode?
about 2 clicks away, so I can get right there as I'm vamping and looking for a name. Okay, I think I looked at
Yeah.
this last. Oh yeah, she's 96 now. Just do the math. No, about 36 when she
So
did
she
this
would have
episode.
been about that age when she did the
She's
episode.
about age correct, and you do have to check in on the Twilight Zone with that sometimes when the guy's like,
Yeah.
"I'm 30," and he's clearly 55 or something. In the first season of the show, we noticed like every male character is like 35 years old, and like every female character is like 27. In the
Yep.
first season in particular, it seemed that was always the case, and it was kind of weird.
I think that's kind of a hallmark of late 50s, early 60s TV. The
Yeah.
guys are like, I'm 35. I was like, yeah, give or take 20 years. Uh,
Yeah, although like what I was saying about the Twilight Zone, I guess being a little bit forward thinking. We a few weeks ago we did the episode Night Call, which I didn't even realize this until I'd watched it twice and was halfway into the conversation. I was like, oh, there's no men in this episode. The star is Gladys Cooper, who is quite elderly at the time.
mm,
There's no like you know bombshell on. It's like it's like a stage play, kind of like this one. You could do Queen of the Nile
yeah,
as a stage play, no problem. So, but that one I was like, oh, how many early 60s shows did have exclusively female characters with, and maybe you see a guy in the background at some point. That's about it. The doctor comes in for like a minute. That's about it.
yeah, yeah. That's cool. I'm gonna have to go watch that one now.
So, although I will say, the guy I did the episode with loved it. My dad watched it. He comes into some of the chats and he was like, I don't like that one. So, results may vary, I guess is my point. But
Your mileage may vary.
yes.
Gotcha.
Let's see what do I have in my notes. I have mom as daughter of the child. I'm thinking of Beach Boys there. Child's father of the man. Um, yeah, I wrote the scarab is not quite as creepy as the one in the Mummy, but it was pretty creepy for 1964 television. And then the demise of Mr. Herrick was pretty intense for 1964 television, especially when his skull
Yeah.
cracks.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really cool. I was, watching this again thinking about, wow, how did they do those effects? Like, what is this skeleton made out of? I thought that was really interesting.
It's been a few years since I watched it, but I mentioned Long Live Walter Jameson, which has a similar effect, and I'm like, yeah, they're doing it better here. They've stepped their game up in the
Mm,
5 ensuing years, so good for them.
yeah.
Um, I guess we'll talk a little bit about Mr. Herrick, our unwitting victim. That is, yeah,
Yeah.
he gets a lot of red flags.
I'm like, bro, I get that you are trying to get your story, but as soon as she's like, "Oh, Mr. Herrick, you're looking so Mickey Outy tonight," like, nope, nope, he's dead.
I
This is
mean,
how she kills people. She seduces them, pops a scarab on them, boom, you're gone.
yeah, and the daughter is like telling him almost directly, like, leave now.
Yeah.
Things are 100% bad. He's like, ah, whatever, it'll be fine. I'm a big boy. And also, he goes straight to that coffee. I mean, he does not have any pause in drinking that. So,
Well, to be fair, he had the coffee with her earlier, and
yeah.
it was fine. But obviously, his second go around, whew, that was some bad coffee.
He turns around just long enough for her to Mickey it, you know?
Yeah.
Like I thought the blocking was kind of funny in that where he's looking at her, he turns around for 5 seconds, close up of her putting in the poison, and then he turns back around like right as it's convenient. I was like, okay,
hmm
maybe that's not how people move. It's fine on, again,
Yeah.
even today you can get away with that. I just thought it was funny.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Uh, I'm kind of looking through things. Too many murder time question mark. Hmm. Well, I guess we'll get a little more specific with some questions unless you have an observation you want to throw out.
Um, yes, I did. And where did it go? Oh, thinking about him having to do the research. So who is this actress? And tell me about this. So he's calling his boss. And he's like, "Get me all the files you have on blah blah blah." It's like, Internet Movie Database in 1964.
Yeah, it's real easy now, isn't it? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. As somebody who spends many an hour going on an IMDb rabbit trail, uh, or IMDb rabbit trail or like seven, uh, and I'm like, why doesn't he already know this information? Shouldn't like this be, but no, no, nobody would have that information readily accessible.
no, they make
You
it sound like it's
Yeah.
impossible to have seen a movie made before 1920, which I guess in 1964 it is pretty
Yeah,
difficult to see that.
probably would have been. Yeah.
And I mean, actually, there is a kernel of truth to that, a very large kernel of truth, because I think we've lost 90% of movies made before 1920. But there are
Yeah.
movies made before 1920 that you can watch.
hmm
Actually, ironically, I think one of the big missing ones is the full 20s Cleopatra with the vamp lady. What is her name? That's gonna drive me nuts because I should know it. Um, I'll shout it when I get. But yeah, there's a major, big budget performance of filmed Cleopatra from the like 1924 or something. Sorry, I'm doing that thing where you type and talk at the same time.
Anthony and Cleopatra,
Whoa,
1924.
it might be that.
Uh,
The
Ethel Tear.
nah, that's not it. I'll
Uh,
shout it out when it just pops in my brain because I know this lady's name. Yeah, she was kind of the vamp, the original goth girl, kind of, and then they're like make
oh,
her
okay.
Cleopatra. Yeah.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, I don't know who that is off the top of my head.
It's one of those things where I've read a biography on the lady. Why can't I bring her name? Have a recall on her name right now.
Yeah. No, you're like original goth girls like Elvira? No, not that one. The other one.
Wow, there's Cleopatra in Space, a 2019 animated TV series. Okay, that's at least slightly interesting.
Hmm.
Anyway, I'll just shout it at a really inappropriate time, but I do like to go
Cool.
into a few questions for each episode, which I am now seeking on you for the first time because yeah, I didn't prep you for that.
That's okay. I'm a
Um,
quick study. I can do it.
okay, who? in this episode goes in or through the Twilight Zone?
Ooh, Herrick goes in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, I mean, what regular guest Andrew does say, what does Rod say? And in the prologue itself, he's like, he is staring into the face of the Twilight Zone, which
Yeah,
means
yeah.
Does that mean Cleopatra is like beyond human now, you know?
Ah, fair. Good
Because she is
question.
now of the Twilight Zone.
Right. Good question.
Theta Bara, there we go. Okay.
That's who it is. What's her name?
That's who it is. Yeah, and the reason it was driving me particularly as insane is because they named one of the country bears at Disneyland after her. I think the one
Oh, okay.
Theta Bear or something. I think that's the one that's swinging from the top if you've seen the Country
I
Bear
got
show.
you.
So
I was actually just at Disneyland about a week and a half ago, but we did not do the Country Bears.
I did the Country Bears last time I went. I had to do my Country Bear sighting. So but yeah, I think Herrick, it's one that, like I said, it's kind of a stage show episode. So there's, I mean, not even many people to think about. How about the daughter, though? She's the daughter of this supernatural Cleopatra. She's been living with her, it seems, for 70 years. Is she in the Twilight Zone? Is she a product of the Twilight Zone? What is Viola's status?
That's a great question. I had a few thoughts about her. I was like, one, why hasn't she left? Like, can she not leave? Is she somehow barred there to where she has no means of escape or getting help? Um, I mean, obviously it's gonna sound nuts, is my mom, who looks half my age, uh, has been holding me hostage for my entire life. And and she kills men with a scarab beetle to stay young. Yes, that will make you sound very, very sane and normal. Um,
That should
so
check out.
yeah, that would definitely check out.
You're actually
Uh,
hitting on a bit of a weird trend that the Twilight Zone has had later, because we had Uncle Simon, an episode in which a woman is to keep an inheritance basically has to stay in the house and take care of um her dead uncle's robot. She didn't get along with the uncle, and then the robot is programmed to be exactly like the uncle, so she doesn't get along with the robot either. But she can't leave the house. It's like, to
right.
keep this inheritance, we're gonna check and make sure you don't leave. I'm like, that's weird. Why would she stay? You know? So kind
Yeah,
of a similar thing there. And there's one other incident recently of the lady who can't leave. It's like, why not? You know?
right. Right. Yeah, so I had that question. Does she, I mean, she obviously knows that her mom is killing these guys to preserve her youthful appearance, but does she not have details? Once Herrick showed up with that whole folder, she told him, like, don't show it to her. Yes, this is all true. Don't show it to her. Get out. At that point, he's got enough info. Would he not have believed her if she had said, hey, yeah, she's gonna somehow take your energy and kill you to preserve her youth. You need to get out of Dodge.
Which she came pretty close to saying that directly, because the daughter did not know exactly what was happening. She's just guessing. But, I think her warning was giving the best guess without saying anything she actually,
Mm.
knew or didn't know.
Yeah, I figured if she'd been around her doing this for that long, I would have thought that she would have at least figured it out by now.
Well, she has a daughter, so she was a young girl with presumably this stuff going on, grew up as a
Sure.
teenager with this stuff going on. So it is her reality, which to you and I, it's like, well, we didn't have, well, at least I'm pretty sure I didn't have an energy vampire mama. And I'm gonna guess you didn't either, but
Defied energy vampire.
well,
No.
as in sucking the life and turning you into a pile of dust energy vampire. So,
No, no, though I do get my baby face from my mama. So
okay.
yeah, but I I just thought
This
it was
is
weird that she didn't have more information because then she alludes like after my husband like she and my husband, like, did the mom like seduce her son-in-law? That's gross.
Yeah, well, she's Cleopatra coming at you. She
Of
knows what she
course.
wants.
Yeah, of course it's all a game to her. But
One interesting thing is I've read a fair amount of historians suggest that Cleopatra is actually rather homely looking, and her wiles is what got her. You know, she wasn't beautiful;
Fascinating.
she was smart.
Okay. Okay.
But I do find that interesting that she's a power broker and not, you know, obviously if you're making your own legend, you might like let that kernel spill out that you're also the most beautiful person on the
Of
planet, right?
course. Yeah, yeah.
Um, but
That's
that
definitely what my bio will say.
but but no, living 38 for 30 forever 38 and you know maybe being like homely. I mean, she could still work that, right?
Why not?
Anyway, I just thought that because of recent books, probably even older books, but I've heard a fair amount of people, you know, like we get that image from movies because if you make a movie, obviously that's who Cleopatra has to be, you know, Elizabeth Taylor in her prime, right?
Right. Right.
Which I guess is what they were thinking doing this episode because she's got a little bit of Elizabeth Taylor vibe, and this Cleopatra,
Yeah.
the big, the notorious, you know, horribly expensive one, I think was 1963. So
Mm.
it's kind of interesting to track when Twilight Zones are pulling on like things that are just in the culture at the time, which might be this one.
Right. Well, which is interesting to call the episode Queen of the Nile and not ever name Cleopatra. But make that illusion that, oh, maybe this is Cleopatra.
I wonder if that's studio notes because I think Fox made that, so maybe CBS or Paramount or whatever was like,
Yeah.
don't
Yeah,
put the
can't
name and
can't
we don't want to
can't say it.
advertise. Yeah, we don't want to advertise our rival's movie. So you
Right,
could do the
right.
story, but you know, don't. Which actually I think is kind of cool because it's
Yeah.
fun. It's like we all know, you know. Not
Yeah,
saying it is kind of fine. Makes you feel
yeah.
smarter.
Yeah, you could definitely draw that conclusion without them saying it explicitly. Yeah.
Uh, my second question, and I do want to put this on Herrick and the daughter. Do they deserve their trips into the Twilight Zone? How about for Herrick?
I mean, I'm not going to say anyone deserves to get murdered. So I'm going to say no, but also I get I get the impulse to I've got to figure this out. I've got to figure out why this is. But also like, bro, you were warned multiple times. GTFO, and you did not listen. So,
Yeah, I see. Maybe I'm more cold-hearted. I was just gonna be like, he deserves it because he had so many red flags, you know.
mhm.
Which I guess it's hard to believe that situation can be real. But well, you know, the I guess Sunset Boulevard is the more like not supernatural version where well, he gets shot in the end. Well, shot at the beginning. That's not even a spoiler. So
Hmm.
but kind of same there's the case of the aging actress. She's actually aging but being more of like an actual energy vampire, like as in like just you know taking this guy's ambition or whatever, so where
Yeah.
instead of just his youth or energy or whatever.
Mhm.
So yeah, I guess it depends how cold-hearted you are for Herrick, but how about Viola the daughter? That brings a more interesting question to if she deserves this.
Again, I don't think anyone deserves to be held hostage, especially not by a parent.
Mm,
That's traumatic. But I also can't figure out why she just can't leave. Or, it would be better to run away and fade into obscurity. This is pre-internet. We have social security numbers at this point. This may be a little more difficult, but somehow her mother has managed to stay alive and go under all these different aliases for so long. I I think she could have gotten out if she had pushed a little harder, and for whatever reason she doesn't. I have to wonder, is the lady who's the maid or the servant that we see in the house, is she all does she also know what's going on?
my guess would be no. One thing with Viola is since you asked about the Herrick's actor's age, I'm looking at Celia Lovsky's age, which when she did this episode was 67, which especially in the 1960s might be a difficult time to step out and start a new life. Like
Fair.
if there were happier times when the husband before the husband had gotten energy vampired, maybe, you know, maybe in their 30s and 40s everything was great. Mom's weird, mom's eccentric, but we're having a fun time. And now, you know, the horror is really slowly dripped out and you're just stuck in this place.
Right.
You can let your
Right.
circumstances hold you hostage if you're used to them, you know?
That's true. That's true. You know, I know folks who have been in abusive situations, and you know, everybody's like, "Well, why didn't you just leave?" It's more complicated than that. So I have to imagine this is something akin to that.
And I think that was a counterpoint when I did Uncle Simon probably said the same thing, like, why doesn't she just leave or in other episodes? And I remember at least once the co-host being, you've never been in a toxic relationship, have you? I'm like, I guess not. So
Good.
good for me. Yay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you know, the idea that you cannot leave. So yeah, I definitely feel bad for her. Nobody deserves to have an actual monster as a parent, you know,
Mm.
literally and figuratively in this case, I guess.
Right. Yeah. What kind of monster? All of the above. Ugh.
Right. The last question I like to put on these episodes, this is not a quality rating, it is a tripometer rating, with
Tripometer.
0 being not trippy at all, 5 being extremely trippy. Um, so you can do decimal points or whatever, you know. If where would you like to place this on a tripometer?
Hmm. I'm gonna say maybe like 6.5.
Oh, that's out of
Because
10. Okay. Well, maybe
sorry. How? I'm sorry.
up to
Oh,
5. So maybe we
oh, up
call
to
that
five.
three.
Sorry,
We'll call that
sorry.
3.25 then.
Yeah. 3.25. That works. Sorry. My brain was still calculating on tens, even though you literally said five out loud. My bad.
We'll have to show up to the apes one where we do it on 7 bananas. It's a scale of 7 on that show.
Oh dang. Okay. So yeah, somewhere around mid range on this one. It's definitely definitely got some good like spooky factor, you know, kind of what you want out of a, you know, late night episode of the Twilight Zone. You've stayed up late, you went to go pick up a late night burger because why not? And oh, I'm gonna sit down, you know, eat my burger, drink my milkshake, and watch the Twilight Zone. This is how I like. This is my ideal way to watch the Twilight Zone. uh, so it's got some nice trippiness. It's not overly scary, but you're like, I was expecting somehow. My initial thought when I first watched the episode was that somehow it was going to be revealed that the actress, her younger and older self, she had somehow split them apart. And so the who she said was her mother was actually her, but you know, older. Somehow that was my initial thought. So having the reveals like I'm her daughter, that was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, I can roll with that. Let's get this figured out. So I enjoyed um, I enjoyed the reveal there, and thought the effect of poor Herrick turning to dust, literally turning to dust, was good. So yeah. So mid range 3.25. I think that's good.
Yeah, and actually, what you're saying with the dust, for me, I'm going to go 4 with this. One,
Ooh, okay,
the Egyptian stuff, you know,
yeah.
kind of to me that adds. I'd start thinking about Stargate or something, right? So Sun
See,
Ra.
I was thinking Boris Karloff, the Mummy. So
Well, I thought a little bit of that too, because
yeah,
the director of this one did what the Mad Magician. He did genre stuff. I'm like, hey, this one has a cool vibe. Maybe I actually want to
yeah.
see some of that guy's movies, you know?
Hmm.
Um, Also, that shot of Herrick decomposing or whatever is kind of a cool, trippy money shot, which, and maybe I'm adding in my own nostalgia of doing this podcast, because especially season 1 and 2 of The Twilight Zone, like every episode, we were like, oh, what shot is the money shot in this episode? And I'm like, we
Yeah,
haven't had that so much recently, and this episode has it like full on. So
yeah,
I
for
do
sure.
like that. Um, so yeah, Egypt stuff, good decomposing shot. The actual horror setup, I guess, isn't actually at Trippy's, but just the little double whammy is making me want to give it a trippy nostalgic for, I guess.
Yeah,
It makes me think of older Twilight Zone in a good way and not in a we've been here before way, which,
sure.
that's a plus. Um, if you do you have any final thoughts on this one that you want to throw out?
Pretty solid episode. It was a fun one to get to come on the show for. So thanks for the invite. This is great.
Right on. And Ashley, if you could tell the folks one more time where to look for your podcasting endeavors.
Sure, yeah. So I am aware of many hats. So you can read my words on my blog, nerdyblogging.wordpress.com. You can also read my words on fangirlish.com, where I write about film and television, mostly Star Trek. You can hear my words being read on the Sci-Fi 5 podcast, full archive at uh, roddenberrypodcasts.com. You can also hear me on Mission Log Genealogy, as we've already said, where Earl Green and I talk all about Gene Roddenberry's early TV writing. So definitely in the same era as the Twilight Zone. So worth checking out there if you're interested in some vintage television, Star Trek, and or Gene Roddenberry, or all of the above. You can also hear me on a few other shows. I'm on We Are Starfleet, which is a Star Trek uh, podcast, and I'm also on Podcast Dash 616. That's Podcast 616. So Podcast Dash 616. Both of those are on the Film Stories Podcast Network. So Podcast 616 is all about Marvel, talking all things MCU. We just had an episode drop at the time of recording about Captain America Brave New World. We're going to have some stuff about your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Of course, we're going to be covering Daredevil Born Again very soon. Finally, you can also hear me on the Video Store Podcast. You can check that out at videostorepodcast.com. That is a round robin show where myself and a couple other hosts, we take turns each week picking films around like a theme or a director or an idea or an actor and pick four movies and tell you about why you should watch them. Kind of in the style of video store recommendations, like what you'd get if you walked into your local video store, which I am lucky enough to be able to do here in my town of Charlotte,
We
North
still have
Carolina.
one
So
holding out nearby, and I've
sweet.
mentioned a few times recently having a Blu-ray apocalypses where a rental store did close, and then I go and buy
Oh,
like,
bummer.
yeah, but then I end up buying like 60 Blu-rays for like $30. So
That's you make it sound like that's a bad thing.
right, right. So I have
Yeah,
tons of movies. People are like, "Oh, you should watch this movie." I'm like, "Oh, here it is. I've never seen it."
yeah.
So that's kind of
Sure.
my groove. And yeah, I recently was on one of the Genealogy episodes doing a hillbilly madman voice, which was the first Wrangler you did, I think.
Yeah, that was for maybe the second one, A Time for Hanging, maybe.
That was it. Yeah. So
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
go
So that
listen
was
to
the
that, you
second
can,
episode of Wrangler. Yeah.
because I always make my guests do the voice acting here by reading the intro. So if anyone wants to hear me taking my own hand at it, there's a case for that. Of course,
Sure.
I do a whole lot of stuff podcasting. You can find that at podcastiopodcastius.org. Talk about the Planet of the Apes as previously mentioned. Really good, really bad movies on films and filth, and there's some video game stuff like Luke Love's Pokemon and Monster Mash is coming back. If you are a Monster Hunter fan, all right.
Cool.
Well, yeah, you want some coffee?
Hey, I do love my coffee. Oh, and if I may, folks, if you want to connect with me on social media, hit me up on Blue Sky. I'm at the nerdyblogger.bsky.social.
Oh, geez, I have to double plug on my end because I
Ah,
haven't been to Blue Sky yet. I haven't
okay.
I haven't hung on Twitter. It's still Twitter on my phone. I never had it update, but yeah,
Mm.
apparently they on our podcasting network is on the under the name Podcast on Blue Sky. So I thought that was impressive. But if you go talk there, you're talking not to me. If someone responds to this point.
That's awesome.
Okay, I'm gonna stop recording. Oh, I'm recording to the cloud. What do you know?